Hello, I'm Rachel Person, the event director for Northshire Bookstore, with store locations in Saratoga Springs, New York, and Manchester Center, Vermont. Thank you so much for your support of independent bookselling. Books by this evening's authors are available for purchase at northshire.com and in both Northshire locations, and I'll be popping some links into the chat where you can order them. We have signed book plates from Rachel Reid and Lexi LaFleur Brown while supplies last, so if you order books from us, you may well get one of those remaining book plates. Throughout the evening tonight, you can put questions into the Q&A box that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. And if you have any trouble with the Q&A box, you can put them into the chat. We'll be holding audience questions and posing them for you at the end of the conversation here. So you can put the questions in there anytime, and I'll save them up and ask them for you later. Those are my boring logistical notes. I'm delighted to get to welcome Lexi LaFleur Brown and Rachel Reid to our screens this evening for an event I've been really excited about, celebrating their new books, Shoot Your Shot and the Shots You Take. Lexi LaFleur Brown is with us today, celebrating the release this week of her debut novel, Shoot Your Shot, a fun and banter-filled romance. She has a master's in public relations and a PhD in education, and she uses her large social media following to advocate for more inclusivity in hockey. Rachel Reid is here to celebrate the release earlier this month of The Shots You Take, which is a heartfelt and moving romance about grief and second chances. She's the USA Today bestselling author of the Game Changers hockey romance series, which are all-time favorites of mine, as well as the previous standalone novel, Time to Shine. They will be interviewed this evening by Jennifer Dugan, a longtime friend of Northshire Bookstore. Jennifer is the author of the best-selling sapphic romance novels for adults and teens. Her acclaimed young adult novels include Hot Dog Girl, Some Girls Do, Playing for Keeps, and the excellent forthcoming Summer Girls. She's also the author of the adult romances The Ride of Her Life and Love at First Set. Please join me in welcoming them to our screens this evening.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Rachel. And I'm so excited to talk to you too. So first, I just need to gush for a minute. I absolutely loved both of your books. They were amazing. Lexi, you had me like laughing the whole time. And as somebody who loves both hockey and Seattle, I loved all the little Easter eggs that were in there and the accuracy, which you absolutely nailed. And then Rachel, your book had me swooning and crying literally 2 times crying. So thank you. And also I will accept your apologies at any time. So let's start off with if each of you could just tell us a little bit about your newest release so that we can catch everybody up if they haven't read yet, especially yours, Lexi, which is 1 day old.
Yeah, sure. So in Shoot Your Shot, we have struggling hockey superstar Jalen, who spends an anonymous night of fun with local artist Lucy, and suddenly he experiences a change in luck. And he's like just delusional enough to think that she's the reason for his improving hockey game, except now he has to convince her to be his good luck charm for the season. And a good luck just doesn't come cheap. But they learn that a little luck goes far in love and hockey.
And Rachel.
My book, The Shots You Take, is a second chance romance between two former NHL defensemen who are now both 41 years old. They're former teammates, former line mates, former best friends with benefits, and they've been through a lot together, and they haven't spoken in 12 years. And one of them, Riley, I should say their names probably, Riley and Adam. Riley's father dies, and Adam comes to the funeral in Riley's small Nova Scotia hometown and tries to win him back in using small gestures and being very careful. So it's a very slow burn, angsty second chance romance between two old men who are still younger than me.
They're hockey old though.
Yeah, they're hockey old, like ancient for hockey.
Yes, they're like peepaws. So let's start at the beginning. Let's talk meet cutes, or in your books, they're kind of both meet hates at the moment in their second, Rachel, their second meeting. So in your opening scenes, Lexi, they have a literal run-in at the bar, and then it gets worse from there. And then soon we see them, which is one of my favorite scenes in the book, where they're talking about their worst qualities instead of their best qualities. And then Rachel, as you mentioned, you kicked us off with them seeing each other again for the first time at a funeral, and it only goes downhill from there for them for a little while. So what made the both of you decide to flip this? We're used to these like charming, funny meet cutes. What made you two want to flip that completely on its head for your stories?
I think the tension was a lot of fun to create. Like doing the opposite of making a perfect situation where maybe you get to see like the perfect side of somebody. It was like, okay, how can I make this as imperfect as possible, create as much tension as possible so that we can really see who these two characters are?
Yeah, I just basically wanted to make a mess and try to clean it up. It's just a fun challenge, and I think it's a fun starting point. So yeah, basically the funeral's the high point of the book for these guys, and it just kind of falls apart. So yeah, it's just a fun challenge.
Yeah, so they should probably read your book first, Rachel, and then Lexi's can like help
That can
even
cheer
out
people
the
up. Yeah,
emotional trauma.
yeah, that might be wise.
So this next question is for Lexi. One of my favorite elements is how you play with the idea, as you mentioned, of luck, rituals, superstitions. Um, I was dying when Jalen was like so convinced that this is like my good luck charm, but every experience that Lucy is having is actually pretty rough in the beginning. He's kind of like her unlucky charm.
Mhm.
And so I loved the dynamic you were kind of building with that. So where did that come from where you wanted to center it so much on this idea of luck? And do you consider yourself to be a good luck charm?
I consider myself to be superstitious. I don't know about a good luck charm, but I definitely consider myself to be superstitious. And that's sort of where that initial idea came from. Like, I grew up playing hockey, being a goalie, and goalies are like notoriously the most unhinged, superstitious athletes. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to create an athlete, and he's going to just be really superstitious because, again, it gives me this freedom to be kind of silly with it too. But there's also like some honesty behind it because there are athletes who have these rituals that they have to do before every single game, which was a lot of fun to write for sure. So I don't know if I'm necessarily good luck, but definitely superstitious.
And now for both of you, while we're talking about superstitions and luck, do you have any superstitions around your writing? Any rituals that you do, a certain candle, a song you have to play, or you just dive in?
Oh, I feel like I procrastinate for a little bit and then eventually I'm like, okay, it's time. I don't know about any ritual yet though.
Yeah, I'm pretty chaotic. I don't. Yeah, I tend to waste a lot of time and then do it all last second too. I listen to a lot of like focus playlists on Spotify. Like enough that my Wrapped at the end of the year is just awful because it's just like all instrumental ambient music. Um, but yeah, I'd say that's, I like to listen to either that or some classical music while I'm writing. Um, Sometimes I burn a candle. I wouldn't say a specific one, but
Um, so the next thing I'm curious about is whenever I'm talking to other romance writers, I'm always curious how you find your main pairing, whether you start with one and build around it, or whether they both have jumped into your head at the same time. Rachel, why don't you go first on this one? When it came to your book, did you have both of them, or did we start with one?
for this book, I definitely had both of them because, yeah, I was trying to write another book at the time, and then just these two characters in the opening scene just kind of came into my head, so I wrote that really quickly, and then I decided that I'd just much rather keep writing that book than what I was writing, so I did. So for this particular one, yeah, the two characters are very much there, both fully formed already, and I figured I'd figure out the plot later, but I had the characters.
And Lexi, how about you?
I had a better idea on Jalen and his character and sort of being this like, he was drafted really high and it didn't work out for him and he's struggling to like get his game back. Um, and the superstition element of it. And then I wanted to do an opposites thing. So once I had like a better idea of him, it was pretty easy to be like, okay, well, who would hate him? Like who would absolutely hate him in the beginning before they knew him? And then really got to develop Lucy and work on her back. Her backstory was probably like the last thing that I really had to work through.
Interesting. I thought it would be the opposite, Lexi, if you were a one at a timer. Um, Fascinating. I'll make a little note of that.
Mhm.
So something that I think you both did really, really well was kind of pull back the curtain behind the glitz and glamour of like what a viewer sees when they're watching an NHL game, particularly involving themes of stress and mental health. Lexi, you do a really good job of kind of deconstructing the stigma around it, with both Jalen and Lucy, bringing up the issues, confronting the issues, and then kind of breaking it down and showing a positive. Riley took obviously a very different route than Jalen does in terms of his mental health. But you showed us that recovery is possible, and you showed us life after retiring from the NHL. Why did you feel it was important to include these mental health themes and in both of your books?
For me, I do include mental health in most of my books. I do think it's important. I think it's an important part of sports in general. That's not, I mean, depending on the sport, but I'm going to say a lot of, especially team sports, it's something that's not talked about enough, not dealt with enough. Um, and so I think it's an interesting and important thing to kind of dive into in these books. I just think it's important in general. And yeah, I think I like to write about these kind of complicated men that come from a very, I guess, like small C conservative environment, where talking about certain things isn't really encouraged. And I've been encouraged by like it seems to be getting better, at least like if you look at like NHL hockey, but there's still a long way to go. So I find it an interesting place to explore, and also it kind of makes me feel better to like help these fictional men.
Yeah, I just wanted to give him like a real issue. And I think that, like Rachel said, like it's not something that's always so discussed and in a sport like hockey. But like all these guys are dealing with the stress and the pressure. And all of them it's going to affect them all differently. And so I just wanted to, he's in this real situation that exists and it's giving him anxiety. How is he dealing with it? Um, and luckily, I can help again, like what Rachel said, you get to help them. Like this is, how it can be if we are accepting of mental health issues in sports like hockey.
Yeah, I think it's a really good message that you both have them using, in Riley's we don't see it on the page, but he mentions that he is, has a therapist, he is getting mental health. They both reach out. They're not trying to just tough it out. That was one of my favorites. So kudos to both of you. I do that a lot in my books too. So I was like thrilled that this wasn't going to be like a white knuckle situation once it started coming up. And then I think this is kind of tied to this also, is a lot of times in romance, especially in some popular hockey romances, we're seeing men portrayed as these like cocky, successful, like hotheads and bad boys and just both of you kind of took things in a different direction. And so your characters felt really like very refreshing and honest and real. What led you to that decision? And how do you think it kind of is in conversation with, the hockey romance genre as a whole?
I think I like selfishly just wrote two characters who I liked. And I was like, this is like the type of person who, maybe not in the beginning for both of them, but towards the end of the book, I was like, oh yeah, like I can totally root for these two. These are two people who I would want to be friends with. Um, and so yeah, taking like a different approach on what this like stereotypical like macho hockey player would be.
Yeah, I mean the hockey romance has just exploded. Like even since my first book came out, like it was definitely growing at that time, but now it's just so massive. And I know for me, the when I the hockey romance books I like tend to be about more complicated, kind of nuanced players, men who do have some mental health or emotional struggles, and maybe aren't just kind of cocky um, or sexy, like kind of one note sexy, I guess. Um, but yeah, I think my preference is for those kinds of books, but I know that there's lots of there's plenty of hockey romance out there for everybody.
Uh, and so this next question is for Rachel specifically. Riley and Adam's story was an emotional roller coaster for me. As I may have mentioned, I cried, which I have not really had. There's not
Sorry.
very many books that actually hit me like that. And I was like, oh my God, what is she doing? How am I going to interview her? And so I loved learning about how they both were kind of dealing with these emotions and dealing with this post-retirement life. And they're very different. And you also portrayed very different endings to their careers. And so what kind of drew you to this retirement centered story and making it so like kind of night and day where they landed?
I I'm always interested in, kind of stories about the guy who made it and the guy who didn't, or the person who made it or the person who didn't, or in this case, they both made it, but like it went off the rails for one of them. But in a way, it's like they both made the right choices for them, sort of like and yeah, it's like one guy's dream didn't quite go the way that he wanted it to, but he made the right choice for himself ultimately. And yeah, I've just always wanted to write a book that was about like I think I've always been interested in like real life stories of you don't hear about them very often, but sometimes a former hockey player is brave enough to talk about you know dealing with depression or something really dark after their career is over, because for a lot of these guys they're like that don't make it, this has been like their single-minded focus for so many years. Like say that they go all the way to like junior hockey level, which would be just under the NHL in Canada, and then it's like there's nowhere else for them to go. If they don't get drafted, they're not going anywhere. No other pro teams want them. They're just done. It's like now they have to figure out the rest of their lives. And I find that really fascinating just because I know, especially here in Canada and other places where hockey is so huge, like when your whole life is building to that one goal, that one dream, and then it's not going to happen. It's like mentally that's huge. So I do find it really interesting. I didn't quite tell that story with this book, but I do find those sorts of stories really interesting.
I think that really you have set up my next question, which was,
Sorry.
are there any other aspects of the sport that you haven't touched on yet, but would love to explore in future books?
I'll be honest, I think I am tapped for hockey romance ideas. I mean, I'm hoping one will come to me again in the future, but I think I need to like explore other genres. Yeah, I think right now I need to not write about hockey for a bit because I think 8 books is good for now.
Yes.
I think I've said all I need to say on the subject.
You got it all out. No untapped areas 8 books later. And
Yeah,
Lexi,
no, I'm good.
you have your second book. Is that also going to be hockey centered?
Yeah, it is. And it's like in the same universe. So there will be like some characters from the first book, but it's a new team. So
Okay,
like there will be a little bit of like Easter eggs from the first book, but it will be a completely new story.
I love it. Um, so your books feature, as we've mentioned, they're in very different points of career and life stages from each other. Rachel, what career advice do you think Riley and Adam would have for Jalen? And Lexi, what relationship advice do you think Jalen and Lucy could impart on Riley and Adam?
Oh my goodness. I think Jalen and Lucy are maybe a little bit too early into their relationship to be giving any relationship advice. Besides maybe better communication. Communication is key. And there's nothing wrong with a good luck text every now and then.
I love it.
I think Adam and Riley would be very happy for him to be getting help with any mental health issues and being open and honest about it, because that is something that they did not do themselves um, at the time that they were playing in the league. So I feel like that would be their number one piece of advice.
Love that.
Do you guys think your characters would be friends if they all went out to dinner?
I think Jalen could benefit from somebody who's like had a career and like have that kind of mentorship. I think that he's very open to that.
Yeah, I mean they're a lot older, but I think I think they'd be friendly.
They could adopt them as their little
Yeah, they'd have
I
baby.
think
fun.
Lucy will play nice.
She better. If
Yeah.
Lucy does anything to Riley, I'm coming over.
Same.
So what scene in these books do you have favorite scenes in these books? Are you someone who plays favorite? What was or if not, what was probably the easiest one that came to you?
Oh my, I have like it's tough for me to pick because I have like a scene, I keep saying the cat scene, which is like a really funny, silly, fun scene, but I'm picking it selfishly because it was really funny and silly to write. But I think also like maybe more for the story is like when they finally connect and they're finally both on the same page with I like you. Oh, I like you too. And they finally get that moment to connect. That's another like important scene to the plot. But the cat one is just that I wrote is just fun and silly.
Yeah, I think I mean a lot of the scenes in this book were pretty tough to write because they were very angsty, but I think yeah, there's a scene, I mean it's not fun, but there's a scene where they they go to a bar to watch a game together. It's kind of near the midpoint of the book and it's a pretty pivotal scene, and that was one I did enjoy writing. It does you know, there's a lot of fighting in that scene, but that was fun to write too, honestly. It was just I mean, it was an important scene, and I knew it when I was writing it, but um, I did enjoy writing it, and I think it is one of my favorite scenes in the book.
Was there any element of your books that were giving you the most trouble or a particularly hard scene to get just right?
I this was my first book I've ever written, and writing the spice, I will be honest, for me was like the biggest learning curve and the biggest thing that I had to like push and challenge myself on. Writing hockey came super naturally, writing jokes super naturally, creating this story, that was fun. But I wanted it to be true to the hockey romance genre. I wanted there to be spice in it. And that was something so new. And like nothing really prepares you for that. There was no high school class that was preparing me to write a spicy scene in an adult romance. So for me, that was like the biggest thing where I was like, okay, I need to really work on this and get it right.
Yeah, for me, the pacing was the biggest issue with this book because it takes place mostly over a week, about a week, and that was tough for me. That was it took me a while to decide on a week, but then once I did, it was like, all right, how's this going to work? How's this going to make sense? So I think just in general that was the tough part.
That's funny. I actually have both of those issues in my own writing. When I wrote my debut, my editor actually was like, I want to introduce you to this really neat tool. It's called a calendar. And I want you to map out each one. And it was like life-changing for me to
Yeah.
write out, because I was like, she's like, sometimes like I think it's been 2 months, and sometimes you say yesterday, and I'm pretty sure it was Tuesday like 4 times in a row. So I definitely struggle with that. And then coming from young adult and making the leap into adult, Lexi, I was like the same thing, where I had not had to write anything
Yeah.
remotely spicy. And I thought Love at First Set felt very spicy to me. And then I have these like hardcore romance readers giving it like 1 or 2 chili peppers. And I'm like, what do you
Yeah,
mean?
I know.
Like my books would be burned. Like I thought so learning to push, and it does, I will say that the notes that you get back on your spicy scene never get easier. I do wish that my editor would just pretend, when she's like, I'm not sure where her leg is.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, but it does get easier as it goes on. I think my secret third book turns into like a horn dog festival. So I think you will see
Yeah,
that you
good.
will come to
Yeah.
enjoy that aspect. Um,
I enjoy the sex scenes.
okay. See,
That's
and
like
you
my
are
favorite part.
farther into them than any of us. So you are
Mhm.
like our fearless spice leader.
Yeah.
I just go into a trance, I think, and come out and there's a sex scene on the page. So
Oh, so you're not even involved either, let alone the editor.
I need
You
to start
I find
listening to
the editing.
classical music, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, yeah. I find the editing process funny on the sex scenes, like the notes and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
inevitably it's like there's too many hands, or
I
uh
got, how many pairs of pants is he wearing? Was a note on one of mine. It's like, I don't know, two.
that, that is good. Yeah, it's always awkward. It's always, and if you haven't gotten them yet, Lexi, just brace yourself because they are coming.
Hmm.
Now I just have a few lightning-ish questions to lead us into the fun audience questions. So do you love or fear Gritty?
I love Gritty and all mascots, except for the scary ones. There are a couple scary ones, but Gritty is not one of them.
Yeah, I don't like the Edmonton one at all. That one's really, really scary. But Gritty, I love.
And this one, actually, my daughter, who's a huge hockey fan, she's 15, she wants to know, which team do you think has the best uniform, and why is it Utah? Which I do not agree with,
I
but
like that Utah one.
she will feel very validated by
I like it. They shouldn't change it. That's great. I like
I
that it looks like a default team. Like,
I was hoping they were going to be the Yetis. I don't know if that's going to end up happening, but I think that
I
would
think
be
for
pretty cool.
copyright issues, they can't. I don't know.
Yeah. I have to say the Kraken. I can't not say the Seattle Kraken, unfortunately. But it is a great, very cool logo, and the colors are cute.
I
I've, I've always liked the classic Sabres uniform, like the classic Buffalo Sabres. They keep messing with it, and I'm like, nope, you guys nailed it the first time.
I do love a lot of the retro
Yeah,
jerseys.
the
So,
ones that have looked the same forever, those are the
yeah.
best ones.
Yeah, I have to agree on the Kraken front. I married into a hardcore Rangers family. So most of us are Rangers. I am a Rangers fan, but one day we were having a conversation, and it was right after the expansion. And they were like, well, you didn't really get to independently pick your team. And I said, I'm going to go by uniform. And I settled on Kraken. So we
Oh,
actually go see Kraken Rangers every year when they play in Seattle and in New York. But I have to say, I think Kraken, especially the Winter Classic uniform, is my
mm.
favorite of all the Kraken uniforms. But I think Kraken. Um,
I like the Rangers jersey because it's flattering with the diagonal letters.
Mhm.
yes, I have.
Because all the other ones have a big old logo in the middle, they don't fit well. But the Rangers jersey, it's like sleek.
I do. We are the rare family that loves the Rangers third jersey, which you might not know if you're not a Rangers fan, but they have this solid navy blue that a lot of people don't love because the C's and the A's are like huge.
Mm.
But I think they're great. and very exciting. Uh, if you could invite one current NHL player over for dinner, and Lexi, it can't be somebody that you have had dinner with, so
Oh
we're
my
going to rule out the
goodness.
Kraken for you.
Yeah,
It's
this seems way more possible for
delicious.
Lexi.
And why?
I'm gonna pick Alexander Ovechkin because he's about to break a huge record.
That would be fun.
He's kind of the star of the season this year, so.
Also, you don't have to make very fancy food for him, from what I hear. He likes
Oh
pretty
yeah,
pretty junky
some
food.
pop or
Yeah.
some soda.
Oh yeah, somebody said Marc-Andre Fleury. That's a good one. I might pick that. I
Mm.
really am going to miss him a lot.
Yeah, that would be a fun one. I would be worried
Also,
about
he's closest to my age.
I would be worried about all the like shoelaces tied
Oh
together,
yeah, that's true. He would
like the
prank me. No, that's
planks,
true.
you go
Bad pick.
out and your car's saran wrapped or something. I think he would be a good time. I might meet him in public though, just to
Yeah.
With witnesses.
Yeah.
Yes. And my daughter answered this one as well, and she wanted everybody to know that it would need to be Rempe, who is her favorite player.
Oh yeah, Rangers.
We have gone to all the AHL games, and now for that, there's her big birthday wish is I'm taking her to Madison Square Garden next week for her birthday. Hopefully he's still up. Are you, when you're watching hockey, are you a sit quietly in your seat fan or a jump up and shout fan?
I'm pretty quiet.
Yeah. It depends. I feel like the stakes now are so much lower than they were when like I was watching my husband. So like when I was watching him, I was like, kill him, get him. Like hit him. Like I was a lot more into it. And I feel like now I'm like, well, if the game's really tight or it's really intense, yes. But I have to like listen to my husband now, so I've got to be kind of quiet.
I
That's
rarely get to go to an NHL game because I don't live anywhere near any teams. So I am really excited to be in the building when I'm at one, but like, yeah, I'm usually pretty low key.
How much TV or in person hockey would you say you really watch on an average week, let's say, or month, year, if you don't watch regularly? Are you still like in it to win it watching hockey? Are you just watching for your husband?
I'm like listening more than watching because I to listen to him call the game. So I watch a ton of Kraken hockey. Like really I do. I don't get to as much hockey games anymore because he's not playing anymore. And I think that's like a misconception. We don't get free tickets to every single game. We do get some free tickets, but not to every single game. And if I go to a game, then I can't hear him call it. And like that's, I want to he listen to him call the game. So I'll go to some games, but a lot of it is watching hockey. And usually just watching the Kraken though.
Yeah, I watch pretty much every Habs game, and some other games. I'm the only person in my house that watches hockey or cares about sports at all. So, and we only have one TV, so I don't hog it to watch hockey all the time, but I do like watching as much as I can. But I love any opportunity to see a live game in any league.
Yeah, it's funny how before I really loved hockey, it was the same thing where we would have like the main TV in the living room, and I would be like, you can't, they would be like, oh, there's a game on. And I'd be like, there's a game on every other day
Yeah.
from like October to May. This isn't like
The
ridiculous.
season's too long.
Doing
It's
this.
too long.
But now I am like sad. I'm like, oh, only have so many games left. And we see every Rangers game, most of the Kraken games, and now my daughter has decided she follows the Canucks as well because she loves Victor Mancini.
She
He
likes
played
pain.
one game. He got traded. That was her favorite AHL player, and Hartford Wolfpack traded him to Canucks. And he has literally played one game for like 4 minutes, and she was glued. Um, Incidentally, her birthday game is against the Canucks, and I'm like, please, please let this man travel, make her birthday dreams come true. But I have set her up for disappointment already on that front. But now we have hockey going. It feels like 24/7 between the three teams. Someone is always watching hockey. And on that happy hockey watching note, I think, Rachel, it's time for audience questions.
Yes,
What do you
we've
have?
got a lot of great questions that have come in both in the chat, which I've been following, and in the Q&A box. So I've got lots of great ones there. First one is from Katie. She's asking, was there anything you had to cut from your story that you loved, but it just didn't end up working? And can you share any of those darlings that you had to kill with us?
Oh my goodness, I'm trying to
I'm
think.
trying to think too.
I feel like because most of what I really wanted in it ended up in it, and all of this stuff that like I did have to cut, like it just helped me develop a better understanding of the character, but I also could see how it like didn't fit into the story. And my story, you know, throughout all the edits took such big changes that I'm like, it really, the darling needed to be killed.
I can't think of much I cut from this book. I can tell people about something I cut from Time to Shine if people are interested, which was a trip to the Calgary Zoo that they went on together in the middle of winter. And I watched so many videos about the Calgary Zoo, and I watched like all those videos where somebody will walk around with a video camera for like their entire time at the zoo, just like so you get their POV on the entire trip. And like I learned so much about the Calgary Zoo, and then I cut the whole scene. So um yeah, that was that was a waste of about a week. But I do think it was the right decision to cut it. I don't regret it.
I have to say, Jenna just said in the chat, and I love this, that Casey would have had so much fun at the zoo. And I have to say, I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, the thinking was that he actually goes a lot. Like this is his place to relax. He's a regular at the zoo.
Speaking of Jenna, she had another great question that she had posed, which is one of my big questions about hockey books is how do you balance the action of the sport with the rest of the story? Sometimes hockey romances are a little too fade to black on the hockey.
Yeah, I think with mine, like getting hockey on the page was really important for me. I knew that there was going to be the expectation that you were going to see hockey on the page. And I think it has so much to do with Jalen's story too. Like this is his comeback and like he deserves, like I want to write about him actually, you know, playing good hockey. And it was a lot of fun for me to do it too. But yeah, you have to balance like you know, it can't just be all hockey. And so like finding those good moments where it's like, hey, let's throw in some action and then we can get back to the romance.
Yeah, I'm always worried the hockey parts are gonna bore people. So I'm my editor's usually like a little more hockey, just push this a little bit more because I'm always wrapping it up pretty quickly. And this new book has almost no hockey. It has just enough hockey that I can call it a hockey romance, and that's it. So it's like barely any because it is about them after retirement, but there's some flashbacks, but there's a tiny bit. But yeah, when I do write hockey, I do try to find that sweet spot of it being, you know, accurate enough that people who know hockey will not think it's ridiculous, but not so, like such a stickler for detail that like other people will be bored. So I do find that difficult. It is one of the biggest challenges. I guess those are like my sex scenes. That's like when I'm like, oh God,
Yeah.
so hard.
Michelle asks, she says, hockey is not necessarily considered the most diverse or inclusive sport. I admire both of you for creating characters that we might not often see in the rink. What gave you the courage to write characters that rub up against the perceived norm? And do you feel a responsibility toward advocacy work?
Yeah, I think that's just kind of what my online following started as was I was just talking about inclusivity in hockey for women, for people of color. And so when I started to write this, I mean, the characters and everybody just kind of reflects the world that I live in. And so it was really easy, you know, this is just what these people are. And especially I live in Seattle and the book is set in Seattle. So it just like wasn't something I was trying to do really. It was just something that happened as I was creating these characters.
Yeah, I think for me, like setting out with the very first book, it was like this is sort of how I was, I don't know, kind of balanced. Like I've been a hockey fan since I was a little kid, but I've always been aware that there are some really problematic things about it, and there are many times where I'm like, I'm never watching hockey again because of whatever the latest thing is that happened. But so these books were sort of like me balancing things a bit and kind of trying to um, yeah, get some of my own feelings about the sport onto the page, but also just yeah, I think important to represent um, people that could be very real in the hockey world that maybe don't get a voice.
So this next question comes from Heather, and it's for Rachel specifically. She says, you wrote the repair of Adam and Riley's relationship so beautifully. How did you approach the challenge of writing that repair in a way that was healthy and safe for both of them?
Well, thank you, first of all. And yeah, it was, I mean, it's tricky. This is my first time trying to do like a second chance romance. And the hard thing about them is that you have to kind of make at least one of the people do something awful, to to make it make sense. So um, yeah, there was always that fear that, I made either the thing that happened in the past was something that couldn't be forgiven, or that, in the present, one or both of them isn't being reasonable enough, isn't being forgiving enough. So it was tricky to find like exactly the right, I guess, pacing for that, and also to know how hard to push them. Um, and I think the thing with second chance romance is like it's a risk because, the readers are gonna have their own thoughts about what's forgivable and what's not, and like what's who's not being forgiving enough. So yeah, I'm sure that some people will not think it was done well, but I yeah, I liked the challenge of it, and I think my editor's very good too, Mackenzie, and helped me a lot with just little notes like, this might be the point where this guy should forgive this and move on, and then this is where he should forgive this. So yeah, it was good to talk to other people about it as I was writing.
Awesome, thank you. This next question is from Melissa. She'd like to know, do you have any specific literary influences, either authors or books that really shaped you as a writer?
I'm going to talk about Rachel Reid. I'm going to talk about Heated Rivalry because I had been reading a lot of hockey romance, and that was the one book that I read, and I was like, oh, this is so good. And these characters
Thank
are
you.
so good. So that one for me, like especially in this space, I love that book.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The one Cat Sebastian is the author that I think of first because that's like the bar that I'm always chasing, I guess. Like every time Cat Sebastian puts out a new book, I'm like, oh, it's so good. So, like,
Yeah.
I guess that's the author I think of first. Not a hockey romance author, but like, yeah, writes incredible queer romance. Um, yeah, that's probably my number one for sure.
She is, I will drop everything when she has a new book
Oh
out.
yeah,
She is
yeah.
my like one of the like, doesn't matter what else I have on my stack. She's next if she has a new book.
Yeah, yeah, and if I'm having a slump, I'll just reread one of her books for sure.
Yeah, they're like getting a new sweater and a mug of soup delivered to you.
Yeah.
We are close to out of time. So I'm going to wrap up with a fun, silly question that came from Katie, asking what is their favorite Canadian specific snack?
Oh my gosh. I love, and this is weird, I love Eat More chocolate bars.
Oh yeah. It's a
Those are my
meal.
favorite. Yes.
Do you freeze them and eat them, or do you just eat them like
So I
raw?
haven't, but everybody is telling me to do that. So next time I get a refill on my stock, I'm gonna try and freeze it because everybody has been telling me to do that.
Yeah, it's different. I mean, you don't get the chew that you get normally, but it's a different experience.
Mm-hmm.
I do like ketchup chips a lot. That's kind of the trashy Canadian snack that that I enjoy. I think I would miss if I lived in a different country. yeah, that's probably my favorite.
I feel like I need to try both of these things now.
I was recently
ketchup
introduced to
chips
the
are
wonders
great.
of the coffee crisp.
Yes, that's another good Canadian classic.
Yeah, coffee crisps are great. That's a solid bar. That's one I forget isn't, yeah, in the States.
Hmm.
So this has been amazing, and I could listen to you guys talk all night long, but unfortunately we are out of time, so we need to wrap up here. But thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us tonight.
Oh,
Thank
thank you for
you.
having us.
And thank you everyone for listening, watching, giving questions.
Thank you.
Yes, audience, thank you so much for being here. You can find books by all three of these awesome authors in Northshire's stores in Saratoga Springs, New York, and Manchester Center, Vermont. And if you're spread, wherever you're spread, you can also find them on our website at northshire.com. Have a great night, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.